the astronaut candidate. NASA calls you an ASCAN, which sounds vaguely insulting and is meant to remind you that you haven't earned anything yet. You have a PhD in astrophysics and 3,000 hours flying jets, but right now you're a student again, starting from zero, proving yourself in a program designed to break people who aren't supposed to break. The training class meets in a windowless building at Johnson Space Center. 11 other candidates, the most accomplished people you've ever met. Combat pilots, surgeons, engineers who have built things you can't pronounce. Everyone here has been the best at everything they've tried. Everyone here is terrified they won't be good enough. 2 years of training, survival skills, robotics, spacewalk procedures, Russian language. Because the space station's a partnership, and astronauts who can't communicate with cosmonauts don't fly. You spend months in Star City outside Moscow, learning to operate Soyuz systems, eating Russian food, absorbing a culture that approaches spaceflight with a different philosophy than NASA. You're dropped in the wilderness with no supplies and expected to build shelter. This simulates emergency landing scenarios. The capsule comes down in Siberia instead of the ocean. You're alone. It's minus 40 degrees. You learn to eat insects and filter water, and stay alive until rescue arrives. The skills will probably never be necessary. Probably. You're locked in a capsule underwater for 8 hours, running emergency scenarios until they become reflex. Fire in the module, rapid decompression, toxic atmosphere. Each drill ends with you solving the problem or pretending to die, while instructors evaluate your decisions. The simulations are realistic enough that your body can't tell the difference. Your heart races, your hands shake, your brain learns to function through panic. You're strapped into the Vomit Comet, experiencing weightlessness in 40-second bursts while trying to assemble equipment with hands that keep floating away. The parabolas are brief, up, weightless, down, crushing. But they teach you something important. Working in zero gravity isn't natural. Every task that takes seconds on Earth takes minutes in space. Your instincts are wrong. Your reflexes are wrong. You have to rebuild yourself from the ground up. Some candidates wash out. Not many, but some. The pressure finds the cracks nobody knew existed. One quits after a panic attack during underwater training. Another fails a medical evaluation that reveals something the screening process missed. You watch them clean out their lockers and you don't look them in the eye. Because luck played as much role in your survival as skill, and you know it. Graduation doesn't come with a mission assignment. It comes with a pin and a title, and admission to a waiting list that might take years to climb. The mission specialist. Your first flight is support crew, 12 years after you applied to NASA. 12 years of training and waiting and watching other people live the dream you've been chasing since you were 8 years old. But now you're here, strapped into the mid-deck of a space shuttle, feeling the vibration of engines that generate 37 million horsepower, waiting for the words that will change everything. Go for main engine start. The sound is not what you expected. Louder, more violent, more physical. The vehicle shakes like it's coming apart. The G-forces press you into your seat so hard you can't lift your arms. The windows fill with flame. Your vision narrows to a tunnel. Then, suddenly, silence. Weight disappears. Your arms float up without being told to. Outside the window, the earth curves away beneath you. Blue and white and impossibly beautiful. And you understand for the first time why everyone who's been here comes back changed. Your mission is satellite deployment. Technically, complex, scientifically important, not particularly dramatic compared to the moon landings or the early shuttle missions. But you're in space. You're actually in space. The thing you dreamed about while watching NASA broadcasts as a child. The thing you worked toward for decades. The thing that seemed impossible for most of your life. It's real now. You're living it. You spend 8 days running experiments and performing maintenance, and stealing every possible moment to stare out the windows at a view that never stops being miraculous. The Earth rotates beneath you, showing every continent, every ocean, every city glowing at night. You see hurricanes forming from above. You see the thin blue line of atmosphere that's the only thing keeping 8 billion people alive. You see how small it all is, how fragile, how improbable. The overview effect, they call it. The cognitive shift that happens when you see Earth from space. Some astronauts become environmentalists, some become mystics. Some can't readjust to normal life and spend their remaining years trying to get back up here. You understand all of them now. Your first spacewalk lasts 6 hours. You're attached to the station by tethers and surrounded by equipment. But what you notice is the void. The absolute emptiness that extends in every direction forever. You're dangling above an abyss that has no bottom, and the only thing between you and that abyss is a suit that a technician assembled from components that were built by the lowest bidder. You work anyway. You complete your tasks. You return to the airlock and pressurize and remove your helmet and realize your hands are still shaking, even though the job is done. The pilot. Your third flight, you move to the flight deck. Not commanding yet, but controlling the vehicle during critical phases. Ascent. Entry. The moments when human hands have to override the computers, because something unexpected always happens. Docking with the International Station requires precision measured in centimeters. You're closing at inches per second, watching distance readouts tick down, making corrections so small the stick barely moves. One mistake means collision, debris, potentially catastrophic damage. Your crewmates are depending on you. The station crew is watching through windows. The entire mission hinges on getting this exactly right. Contact light. Capture confirmed. The hooks engage and suddenly you're part of the largest structure ever assembled in space. 250 miles above the Earth, traveling at 17,000 miles per hour. You float through the hatch into the station and smell the recycled air and see the faces of people who've been up here for months. And you understand that this is home now. Not for you, not yet, but for the people who live here permanently. This collection of modules and solar panels is the only ground they know. Your mission adds a new laboratory module, spacewalks to connect power cables and coolant lines, careful choreography performed in a vacuum where mistakes don't offer second chances. You watch a bolt float away during installation, spinning slowly toward open space, lost forever because someone's grip slipped for a fraction of a second. Nobody mentions the bolt in the reports. Nobody talks about how close they came. The small failures get forgotten. The big ones get memorials. You know the memorials. Challenger, 1986. 7 dead because an O-ring failed in cold weather and management ignored warnings. Columbia, 2003. 7 more dead because foam insulation hit the wing during launch, and nobody could fix it in orbit. Apollo 1, 1967. 3 dead in a fire during a ground test before anyone had even left the atmosphere. Spaceflight is dangerous. That's not PR language or false modesty. It's mathematics. The energies involved are enormous. The margins for error are non-existent. And every system is a compromise between capability and weight. The astronauts who died weren't unlucky. They were representative. Given enough flights, deaths are inevitable. You accept this, everyone accepts this. The mission continues because the mission matters more than individual survival. At least that's what you tell yourself. Commander. 23 years after you applied, 14 flights total, more hours in space than you ever imagined possible, and now you're responsible for everything. The vehicle, the crew, the mission that represents billions of dollars and decades of planning. Your crew trusts you completely. That trust terrifies you more than anything else. They're going to do exactly what you tell them, even if you're wrong, because that's how astronauts survive. Authority has to be absolute when seconds matter. If the commander hesitates, people die. Launch day feels different from this seat. You can see everything. The countdown displays, the abort indicators, the trajectory that will either carry you to orbit or deposit you in the Atlantic. The pilot next to you is running checklists with the calm efficiency that training produces. Behind you, your mission specialists are strapped in and waiting. Godspeed, says the voice from Houston. The same word they've said at every launch since Alan Shepard. The same word that sent Challenger and Columbia toward disasters that nobody saw coming. The engines ignite, the vehicle rises, the weight multiplies until breathing becomes labor, and then, exactly 8.5 minutes later, everything stops. You're in orbit, you're in command, and for the next 2 weeks, every decision is yours. The mission goes well. They almost always do. Because the planning is obsessive, and the training is relentless, and the people NASA selects are exactly the kind of people who don't accept failure. But you know the missions that didn't go well. You've studied them, memorized them, internalized every lesson learned from every disaster. Your crew returns safely. That's the only metric that matters. But command takes a toll. The responsibility weighs differently than you expected. Every decision you make affects people who trust you completely. Every risk assessment balances mission success against crew survival. You spend hours reviewing procedures that were already reviewed by hundreds of engineers, because if something goes wrong, the fault will be yours. The buck stops at the commander's seat. That's not a figure of speech. The debrief takes 3 weeks. Every anomaly analyzed, every decision second-guessed by people who weren't there, who didn't feel the pressure, who have the luxury of hindsight. You defend your choices. You accept criticism for the choices that were wrong. You learn and you prepare for the next command, hoping you'll be better, knowing you'll be tested again. Station Commander. Your final assignment. 6 months aboard the ISS, commanding a crew of 6 from 3 different countries, responsible for maintaining humanity's only permanent presence off the planet. The launch is different now. You're not going up and coming back down. You're going up and staying. The Earth will make 1,000 orbits beneath you before you see it again from ground level. Life on the station is routine, in the way that living in a metal can hurtling through space at 5 miles per second becomes routine. You wake up strapped into a sleeping bag, so you don't float into equipment. You exercise 2 hours daily so your bones don't dissolve. You fix things that break, because things always break, and the nearest repair shop is 250 miles straight down. The work is maintenance and science, and maintenance and more maintenance. The systems that keep you alive require constant attention. The experiments that justify your presence require careful execution. The routine is tedious and terrifying, and somehow both simultaneously. You look out the cupola windows at night and watch cities slide by, lights tracing coastlines and highways and borders that don't exist from up here. Thunderstorms flash across continents. Auroras dance at the poles. The sun rises every 90 minutes, painting the atmosphere in colors that photographs never capture correctly. A supply ship fails during approach. You watch from the cupola as it tumbles past the station, close enough that you can see sunlight reflecting off its solar panels, carrying food and equipment and experiments that will burn up over the Pacific instead of reaching you. Nobody panics. Contingencies exist. The next ship is already being prepared, but you're suddenly aware of how fragile the supply chain is. How dependent you are on things launched from a planet you can't reach. If enough ships failed, you'd starve. If the wrong equipment broke, you'd suffocate. If an emergency required immediate evacuation, the Soyuz capsules can only carry 3 people each, and there are 6 of you up here. You run the lifeboat drills more often after that. You check the emergency procedures twice. You make sure everyone knows their role if the station suddenly becomes uninhabitable. The contingencies probably won't be necessary. Probably. Your 6 months end. A Soyuz capsule carries you home. The descent is violent after months of weightlessness. The G-force is crushing in a way you've forgotten bodies can be crushed. The parachutes deploy and the capsule hits the Kazakh steppe, and recovery teams pull you out into sunlight that feels too bright, gravity that feels too heavy, air that smells like grass and soil and earth. You can barely walk. Your body has adapted to an environment that no longer surrounds you, and readapting will take weeks. But you're home. You completed every mission. You brought every crew back alive. The retirement ceremony is quiet. A pin, a plaque, a handshake from the administrator. 20 years since you applied, 23 since you were selected, and now you're done. The statistics are impressive on paper. 5 flights, 4 spacewalks, over 500 days in orbit. You've circled the Earth more times than you can count, traveled millions of miles without leaving the neighborhood of home. Your name is in history books, minor footnotes and chapters about the International Space Station era, but they're nonetheless. What the statistics don't capture is harder to articulate. The way Earth looks at sunrise, the atmosphere glowing like it's on fire. The silence of space, not empty but full, pregnant with possibility. The moment you first floated free of the airlock and realized that nothing separated you from infinity except a suit, these aren't achievements, they're experiences. And experiences don't fit in footnotes. The next generation of candidates is already training, already dreaming, already willing to give everything for the chance to see what you've seen. At night, you still look up. The station passes overhead sometimes, a bright dot moving faster than airplanes, crewed by people whose faces you know. You track its orbit on apps designed for amateur astronomers. You remember what it looked like from inside, looking down, wondering how you would ever go back to being a person who only sees one sky. People ask if you'd go back. The answer is always yes, immediately, without hesitation. Even knowing the risks, even knowing that the body you'd bring home would be a little more damaged than the body you sent up. Space is worth it. Space was always worth it. The new programs promise more. Moon bases, Mars missions, commercial stations that might carry tourists instead of scientists. The future you dreamed about as a child is still arriving, just slower than you hoped. You won't be part of it. Retirement isn't reversible at your age, but you'll watch. You'll advise. You'll help the next generation reach the places you couldn't. You miss it. You'll always miss it. But you were there. You lived it. And for a few years, a few thousand orbits, a few million miles, You were exactly what you dreamed of becoming when you first looked up and wondered what was out there. The stars don't answer. They never do. But you got closer than almost anyone.